What's going on, guys? We're coming in for another episode of Jimmy Rants. Gonna post today's topic for you guys, and as soon as a few people come in, it's so funny, it doesn't let you pin the post on Instagram until somebody actually gets here. So looks like Deb gets here first, and so Deb is allowing me to pin this post. See if I can pin it without turning the video. I always turn the video around. Look at that. My thing, it's like, let's just turn the video around. Let the whole world see the Precious Moments collection. Alrighty, well, come on in, guys. Thanks for being here today. We are back for another episode of Jimmy Rants. This is my second one of the day. I promise you, I'm not trying to do 2 a day. It's just I have been gone for so long, I'm kind of itching to get content out there, as I have something pop in my mouth right as I'm talking. And so, yeah, we got a bonus episode for you. I tried 6 o'clock yesterday, and I go to bed at like 7:30, 8 o'clock because I'm up bright and early in the mornings. And so by the time I was done with that Jimmy Ranch yesterday, I was so tired. So we're going to start a little earlier tonight at 5 p.m. So if you've been watching the ones lately, we do one at 11 a.m. Eastern, and then we're going to try to start doing them at 5 p.m. Eastern time as much as possible. I'll try to stick to that schedule for now so there's at least some normalcy. And of course, all of this can be on replay over at jimmyrants.com as well as on YouTube. All these videos are going up on YouTube. I'm getting a lot of really great reaction on YouTube as well. But as you know, we've been talking about childhood trauma. And we've been talking about the ill effects that can happen to you if you don't adequately deal with trauma that has happened to you in your past, and for a lot of us, it happened in our childhood. So the thing I want to talk today about is the anger, the bitterness that crops up when you start thinking about childhood trauma. And this was actually spurred on by a comment on one of my Jimmy Rants from, I think it was earlier today, maybe it was yesterday, but somebody said something along the lines of, I just can't forgive my perpetrator who victimized me and abused me. And she said that, and you could just hear in that comment the anger, the bitterness over what happened. And I get it. I mean, I struggled with that for many years with my dad. I struggled with the idea of wanting to forgive him. He didn't deserve my forgiveness. I struggled with anger over what happened, anger about how my life had turned out because of what happened, and then bitterness sets in and it starts to eat you on the inside. And I wanted to talk about something within this concept of this topic that I think is important to note, because I've had several people now write to me and say something similar to me of what I'm about to share with you. So when I was a kid, it was me and my older brother Kevin. We have the same mother. And so we were Judy Ann's sons. Then we had a brother who was our half brother because he had another mother. Same dad, different mother. And brother Nathan got treated different than me and Kevin. Me and Kevin always got verbally abused, physically abused, and just god-awful things happened to us. Nathan never got yelled at, never got screamed at, never got ridiculed, and never got beaten. So that was really fascinating to me growing up, because it showed me my dad had a selectiveness when it came to his abuse. And I have, for the life of me, tried to rack my brain, what in the world was that about? Because if he's an abuser, wouldn't he abuse anybody that was his son? So then I got to thinking deeper. Okay, maybe because my dad had such a bitter divorce from my mom, They had been married about 7 years before Mom said she had enough of his emotional berating. And it was an ugly, ugly divorce, had 2 young children involved. And I was too young to remember any of that, but it was ugly from what I understand. And they got a divorce. Well, after the divorce, it was ugly. It was, he had to pay child support and he had all this kind of stuff going on. I think Kevin and I became the surrogate for my mom, because I looked a lot like my mom when I was a little kid. And I think every time he looked at me, Kevin looked a lot like my dad, but I looked a whole lot like my mom when I was a kid. I look more like my dad now, but I think he saw my face, he saw Kevin's face, and he saw my mom. And so he beat the crap out of us. And he berated the crap out of us because he couldn't do that to her. He did it to us. I don't know how true that is, but that definitely would make a lot of sense. And it would make a lot of sense as to why he would not have abused my brother Nathan, different mother. Even though he did eventually divorce her as well, maybe the divorce wasn't as bitter, maybe, I don't know what the difference was. But all I know is we had anger and bitterness, Kevin and I both, not just towards our dad, but towards this brother, this half brother that got all scot-free. Never got hit, never got verbally abused. Which tells me if my dad was out of control in his anger because of his own childhood trauma issues that were unresolved, he at least had a pause button that he knew how to push. And I don't know if there's some psychological term for this as to how someone can compartmentalize that, oh, well, these are the people that you do abuse, but this is the person you don't abuse. It seems bizarre to me. If you abuse, you abuse. Why was there selectivism when it came to me and Kevin getting abused and Nathan not getting abused? That was hard. And Kevin and I resented Nathan so much when we were kids. Got off scot-free, literally could have done anything. Not us. I knew if there was any report of stuff that I did, it was going to get back to my dad and he was going to just lay into me. So that's a part of this anger, a part of this bitterness, is there did seem to be a selectiveness when it came to the abuse. So it took a long time to talk to Nathan. And I talked to him today, by the way. We do talk. And in fact, we had a really nice long talk the other week about things going on in his life. And so it's one of those things that over time you can heal that. But that anger and bitterness was very real. But what we're talking about here is the people who perpetrated the childhood trauma. And in this case, it was my dad. And the things that he did were unspeakable. And I've talked about quite a few of them on here already in these Jimmy Rants episodes. And I'll tell you, all through my late teens, all through my 20s, into my early 30s, I had nothing but hate, bitterness, and anger in my heart. And it reflected in my relationships with people. It reflected in the way I interacted at my job. It influenced my life negatively for a very long time. And it wasn't until I got into my early 30s, which I told you I was finally coming to terms with kind of what happened. I was no longer fearing my dad looking over my shoulder. That some of this anger and bitterness started to go away because I was releasing it. I held it in for so long that I became morbidly obese because of it. I got to 410 pounds at one point in my life, and it was because I was eating my pain. I was allowing food to be my drug because of the hurt I had in my life. And it wasn't until I let go of the hurt that I could get the food right. That's why the timing of going on the Atkins diet in 2004 was so incredibly perfect. Yes, it was a great diet. Yes, it helped my body respond. No, I don't think I would have seen quite the results I saw with Atkins on a vegan diet, for example, or a low calorie diet or another low fat diet. I just don't think those things would have worked near like low carb did. So it was a combination of letting go of the bitterness, letting go of the anger, and properly feeding my body for the first time in my entire life that I started to see results. And I've been healthy, despite the ups and downs with the weight, I've been healthy ever since. I hardly ever go to the doctor. I keep track of all my blood markers and they're all good. I had a little bit of low omega-3 right before the sabbatical, so I've been taking a lot of fish oil. It's kind of micromanaging it now. But the big picture is I'm of robust health despite still having a belly on my stomach. But again, that could be something that will take a while to go away because of this trauma. Finally coming to realize that the only person that's being harmed by the continued anger and continued bitterness towards what happened when I was a kid is me. And you guys know these people in your life. You know people right now who are so angry at the world because of what happened to them when they were a kid, events that happened to them, the loss of a child, unexpected loss of a parent or some other loved one in your life. We all know people who have been through stuff in their life and they keep holding on to that stuff. And the anger and bitterness just remains. It's almost as if that anger and bitterness is as much a part of who they are as any personality trait. And what they don't realize is they're killing themselves from the inside out. So releasing that, freeing yourself of all the guilt and shame like we talked about in last night's Jimmy Rants, allowing yourself to be happy again. This is something that I had to come to terms with because I was not always a happy-go-lucky kind of person like I am now. Everybody that meets me now says, wow, you're so happy all the time. You're always so joyful. You got a smile on your face. You hug everybody at conferences, and I do all those things. But I wasn't always that way. I was a very angry, bitter man in my late teens and all throughout my 20s into my early 30s. Bitter, angry. Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? That was the big thing I kept kind of coming back to. I did nothing wrong here. Why was I punished? So all this anger and bitterness inside of me was eating me alive. And again, I ate my feelings. I allowed myself to eat stuff that I knew at a conscious level was probably not a good idea, but I did it anyway. I mean, I would stuff my mouth with the crappiest of crappy garbage you can find. And then I'd eat some more. It was a bad mindset to be in. And I regret I lost that part of my life. A good 15 years that I wasted trying to get over something that happened to me for 3 intense years there. 15 years. That's 5 times the amount of time that I was actually abused. Now, I had some childhood abuse and childhood trauma before that, but the main trauma from my dad was 3 years. 3 years. And in fact, I moved to live with him in late December of that 1 year. Yeah, it was still it was about just over 3 years by the time I got out of the house and went off to college. But then it took me 15 years to get over it. That's a lot of anger. That's a lot of bitterness. And of course, nobody's going to blame you that you hold on to that. The problem is I think about all that wasted time. I think about had I released it earlier, I don't know how I would have without some professional help. I wish in hindsight I'd gotten that professional help, because now, with the passing of time, now as I've gotten older and wiser, now that I've learned information about my own life, now it all makes sense. My dad was abused when he was a kid. He had major trauma in his own life. He never fully dealt with that. So then he beat his kids. Selectively beat kids, because he beat me and Kevin, but not Nathan. It makes sense. I understand now. And I think this is the point where you can get to in your life, where when you start understanding the why of it all falls into place. Why do you still hold on to the anger and bitterness? Now, thankfully, I let go of those things a little while ago, but it still takes a long time to still process it all. So it's one thing to say, I'm going to release the anger. I'm going to just stop being angry about this situation. I'm going to stop holding bitterness in my heart. Because look at the people around you that have to endure that anger and bitterness that you hold in your heart. It's a spouse, it's your kids, it's the people that you work with, it's the people in your circle of friends. And we're really good at putting on a face, aren't we? Think about the people in your life that you know deal with anger and bitterness because of childhood trauma. In front of people, they can act like they're normal. They can pretend like everything is okay in their life. But then behind closed doors with their own family, they're screaming at the kids. They're barking at everybody. And they're making everybody's life around them absolutely miserable. Why? Because they ain't let go of that anger and bitterness towards their perpetrator. And until you do, you will never be at peace in your heart. You will never have happiness and joy that will propel you forward. You, my friend, if that's you, are gonna die an early grave, because that anger and bitterness you hold in your body is a poison unlike any other. And the longer you stay mad, you stay angry, you stay bitter about the things that happened to you in the past, the traumatic events that hit you, the only person you're hurting is yourself. So to that person that said, I can't possibly forgive my perpetrator for what they did to me, they don't deserve that. Well, guess what? You deserve it. You do. And if you don't forgive yourself, if you don't let go of anger, if you don't let go of bitterness, you will die an unhappy person. And I don't think any of us want that. I don't know about you guys. I want to live decades more in my life and live it happy and live it free and live it with abundance and live it with so much potential for a bright future. It makes what I've been able to do in my life to this point pale in comparison. That's the kind of hopes and dreams that I have for myself. And it can't happen for those people that continue to hold on to the anger and bitterness. It will break you unlike any other thing in your life. And these are the people that when bad things happen, it cascades. And so these people, oh no, there's something else bad that happened to me. Oh, woe is me. Oh, my whole life has been crappy. Oh my God. And they wonder why they lose friends, they lose relationships, they have problems in their life, why the problems continue. They are the problem. Yes, you were abused when you were a kid. Emotionally, physically, sexually, whatever happened to you, you had some sort of abuse. Or you had some sort of a traumatic event take place in your life. acknowledge it, know that it happened, have your anger, have your bitterness for a moment, and then let that stuff go. Take it from someone who went through some stuff in his life and wasted 15 years trying to get beyond it initially, and then the last 15 plus years trying to make something of my life and realizing that I never fully let that stuff go. I have now, you guys. Life's too short. At this point, I am 48 years old. I want to live until I'm 100. So I got another half a century left in this world if all goes as planned. And I'm going to live it well. And I'm not going to worry about what happened to me before. I'm letting it drive me to be better tomorrow than I was today or yesterday. And that's the way we let it go. That's the way you release that anger. You release that bitterness. You don't let it have a foothold in your life anymore. And I hope this helped you out today. All right, let's see what my Instagrammers have to say. We're going to go to them first, and we have time before we end today's show. I will come over to you guys over on Facebook. And yes, I see you there. I just can't see your comments. So, all right, welcome in, guys. See what you guys have to say. Hey, boy, hey, says Mommy's running on empty. What's going on? Lucky me, I caught you twice today, says CKS. Yeah, I'm trying to do, like I said, I've been gone a little while. So I'm trying to do a couple a day this week. I'm not sure how long I'm going to do that, but we'll do it this week. We are feeling the love, says Debbie. Thank you. Let's see here. My husband's father abused my husband and his sister, but not his two brothers. So sometimes it doesn't seem rational, Tiger says. Yeah, I don't understand the selectivism, at least with me and Kevin getting abused and having the same mother, and then Nathan getting not abused and having a different mother. It makes sense in that case. In your case, abused my husband and his sister, but not his two brothers. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense if they're all blood related, but I've learned something about childhood trauma. It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. So there you go. Mommy's running on empty. My half brother took my abuser's side because that was his father. I have forgiven with therapy, but cannot have my brother in my life anymore. And sometimes you have to cut him out. Thankfully, I still talk to my brother Nathan. And of course, I lost my brother Kevin 12 years ago. He died of heart disease. Can you forgive him, Jimmy? Nurse Nancy. Him being Nathan, Dad? I've forgiven both of them. Well, obviously, Nathan did nothing wrong. He just didn't get abused. And I was upset that, hey, wait a minute, if I'm getting abused, you should get your butt kicked too. I'm glad he didn't, by the way. But yeah, from my dad, I've talked about this before, that he's never outright showed contrition for what he did to me. And it wasn't about that for me. For me, I had to release the anger. I had to release the bitterness because I was living in a painful life there for a little while. And it wasn't until I let that go that I was free from all that. Now, he's never shown any contrition. He's never actually said, I'm sorry I did that to you. Because partly he has never dealt with his own childhood trauma. And maybe he thinks what he did wasn't wrong. This is something you have to come to terms with. Your perpetrator may not even acknowledge or realize that they did anything wrong, and think of it from their perspective. He grew up in a very alcoholic, abusive, screaming dad relationship. That's what he knew about being a father. So guess what he did with me? Other than the alcohol, which he did not do, he was a screaming, abusive father. It was normal. So if that was his normal, Why does he think he did anything wrong? What does he have to apologize for? Maybe he thinks that he had the right to do that to me and Kevin because he had it done to him and his brother and his mom. Doesn't make it right, but it does explain why maybe he's never shown any contrition towards this. Sharon says, my dad treated his stepkids from his marriage after my mom like gold. He did the same when his stepson had kids. Those non-blood grandkids got loving grandpa. Meanwhile, he never chose to meet my kids. Sharon, that's so sad. And I hate that that happened. But if you have anger and bitterness over that, please let it go for your sake, because he has no control over you, but you have control over you. I'm not angry. I just wish he would spontaneously combust. Oh my. She says, that's a joke, people, kind of. I get it, and it's good that you joke about it now. And I can't say I haven't had feelings in my head and heart when I was in my 20s, especially, that my dad would die. And now he's 70 years old and very, very weakened in his physical body. He's lived a hard life. I have such empathy for him because he went through so much in his life. And yes, he caused me my greatest pain in my life. But he had pain that was unimaginable, that he didn't deserve either. So he's getting to that point in his life where he's not going to be with us much longer. And I remember my brother Kevin always telling me that he never saw my dad cry until his dad died. So his dad died when I was about 2-3 years old. So Kevin would have been about 6 or 7. So Kevin remembered very vividly that when my dad's dad, who beat him relentlessly as an alcoholic, when he died, he was bawling his eyes out. And the next time he bawled his eyes out was when Kevin died. So Kevin died in 2008, and that was the first time I ever saw my dad cry. And it made me realize when I saw my dad cry 2008, that's when the humanity of this man who was my abuser became real. And of all the people in the world who comforted him in that moment when we found out Kevin, they were going to pull the plug, I comforted him. This man who punched me in my face and my head, threw me into walls, whipped me with a belt so hard on not just my butt, but on the back of my leg, leaving deep welt marks. I hugged him. I held him as he wept uncontrollably after he lost his firstborn son. He was real. He was human for the first time in my whole life. Human. Before that, he was a monster. And from that day forward, every time I've talked to my dad now, before we hang up the phone, he always says, I love you. Never once said it when I was a kid. So in his own unique way, he's never shown contrition. He's never expressly said, I'm sorry what I did to you. He's never shown any acknowledgement of the stuff he did. But I think that was the moment the anger and the bitterness in my heart fully healed. That was 12 years ago. Now, I still have moments. I still have memories. I tell you guys about this replay in my head of different moments. I can see them right now in my head. But that was seminal. And it's so sad that it took my brother dying to bring that to fruition. Maybe it would have eventually happened, but that sped up the process, that's for sure. Laura says, I admire you. It's not easy to talk publicly about your trauma. Well, one of my goals, Laura, in doing this was to normalize these conversations. And one thing that I have heard again and again in doing these Jimmy Rants, I get feedback after every one. Everybody talks about thank you, thank you, thank you for making this so accessible. Because you could take this in a number of directions. You could just be pie in the sky, everything's okay, move on with your life, isn't life great? And I'm not that kind of person. And then you could be oh man, it sucked, man. It was horrible going through all that stuff. Oh, it is so miserable. There's a happy medium between those two extremes. And I'm trying to strike it. And from the reaction a lot of you guys are giving me, I am striking that balance between, yes, this is what happened, but yes, this is the good news that has happened as a result of that bad stuff back then. Good things are happening now. And here's practical applications about how you come out of it. I'm trying to provide useful information, not just pie in the sky or gloom and doom. It's kind of a mix of both. And I'm going to keep trying to strike that balance. If at any point you feel like I've lost that balance, please let me know. But I am circumnavigating these waters kind of uncharted because I've never talked about this stuff before publicly. I've been talking about health and diet and that kind of thing for 15 years. I've never talked about some of this stuff. So I am using the skills I know about how to talk, but it's really all experiential at this point and not really something I have like professional knowledge about. But neither did I keto when I first started. I didn't have any professional knowledge of keto, but I sure did learn. So I am trying to learn as much as I can, and will continue to provide information all along the way as I continue learning. Mommy said, I lost a lot of weight in 2003, but I think when I started getting attention from men, it just freaked me out because of the abuse. And so I ate. That's not uncommon. I've heard a lot of women that they got fat because of their abuse in their past. And then they started getting unwanted attention from men and it freaked them out and it re-traumatized them all over again. So I've heard that quite a bit. Low Carb New Yorker, love you, brother. Good to see you back. Thank you, man. What do you say to people who think we are holding on to it by talking about it and bringing it back up? That's a great question. I don't think talking about it means you still have it as a foothold in your life. Talking about it is a part of the solution to holding on to the anger. Part of the solution to letting go of that bitterness once and for all. Think about the people who never talk about it in their life. Never, ever, ever. They've got best friends who they tell all the deepest, darkest secrets to about everything in their life, but they never tell them about this. So I think talking about it is the sign that you're healing. One reason you see Jimmy Moore on here talking about it so openly. Let's see. Elise says, I'm 44 in June. Until 39, I always thought the world was against me, out to get me. Losing the weight and getting healthier made a huge difference, but I also had an emotional journey. Thank you, Elise. Here. If I'm being honest, I probably thought the same way. That the world was out to get me. That I just must have bad luck in my life. Because all through my 20s, I flailed. I was flailing bad in my 20s. And anybody that knew me in my 20s, I apologize to you right now. Because I was in a bad headspace. And it was really bad. And yes, losing the weight when I was 32 helped me as well. And that emotional journey is continuing to this day. Really kind of got kickstarted during my sabbatical. That was something I had to come to terms with too. But I flailed there thinking, and I was angry at the world. I would have somebody do me wrong in business and I would just scream, I'm gonna get you fired. I'm gonna da-da-da. And I was just that guy. I was a Karen. For those of you that like do TikTok, they always make fun of Karens for, well, I want my fries to be hot when I eat them. You know who Karen is. All the young ones are going, hey, he knows what Karen means. Let's see. Bullock in 2018, haven't heard from you in a while. Hurt people. We must break that cycle. Your story is breaking my heart. I'm thankful you're healing now. I am healing now. And it's all because I was willing to take this on. I have to say, I did see therapists and counselors and psychiatrists, all professionals, freaked me out, made it worse. Maybe it's just my luck, but I'll never go back. And I've heard people say therapy didn't work for them, and I'm assuming the therapist matters. Like, if you don't have a connection with that therapist, like I talked to a life coach who is a licensed therapist, and I still talk to her. In fact, I've got a call in a couple of days to her, and she's helped me immensely through this. She and I connect. She and I have some kind of a chemistry when we talk, and so it makes the conversations go right where they need to be really fast. So if you don't have that kind of deep connection with the person trying to help you, then yeah, you're right. It's just not going to help. So thankfully, you found other ways to heal and get help without their help. Ashton says, I learned that I had to let go and forgive in order to move on and heal my heart and to improve my emotional well-being. Yeah. Mommy says, speaking out about my abuse is going to make some people upset, but I just don't care. See, here's the thing. I've been telling you guys a lot of stories about my life, and I was talking to my mom earlier. She watches me on Facebook, so if you're here, Mom, hi, Mom. And I told her some of the things I was saying, and she's like, keep talking. Keep talking. Because you're going to help people. I have not talked to my dad. My dad is not in a good physical place. And from what I understand, he's not a good mental place either. He's deteriorating because he's never dealt with his trauma. He still has anger and bitterness in his heart. But he's too old to do anything with it. I don't think you're ever too old to deal with your childhood trauma. If you're on your deathbed, deal with your childhood trauma. Come to terms with it. Yeah, you wasted a lot of your life not coming to terms with it, but come to terms with it now. Because now, regardless of whatever now is in your life, you're 25, 55, 95, come to terms with your childhood trauma. Release the anger, release the bitterness, because it's only hurting you. And as Mommy says, people might get upset, and I just don't care. At this point, it needs to be talked about. Purple Owl says, very difficult to forgive someone who has never apologized. Well, see, that's the thing. If you're waiting on an apology, I never got it from my dad either. No contrition. No nothing. No acknowledgement, no nothing. But forgiveness is not about them. I'm going to scream this from the mountaintop. Forgiving someone is not telling them that what they did was okay. It was not okay. Forgiving them is telling yourself that you're okay now. And you are okay now. The moment you realize forgiveness is about you and releasing you of that anger and that bitterness is the moment you can start thriving in your life again. Sorry, my nose is itching. This isn't about them. It's about you. You love your abuser. You just want the abuse to stop, says Tiger. Yeah, I did love my dad when I was a kid. I didn't understand why this guy who helped to bring me in the world had such seeming hate against me. Now I now realize he didn't hate me. He hated the situation in his life that got him to be hit. Which is an amazing psychological thing if you think about it. And somebody mentioned this earlier on Jimmy Rants from the earlier one I did. oh, I got abused, but I would never abuse my kid. I'm like, you want to bet? Want to bet? Every single abused kid almost invariably abuses their kids because that's what they know. And it seems so strange. This horrible, horrific thing that happened to you, getting beat as a child, and you think in your mind, I will never be like that person that did that to me. And yet you have kids, and guess what you're doing? Same damn thing. Seen it time and time again. And it's one reason I'm glad I never had kids in my 20s. Because I would have beat them. No doubt about it. Even though it was so abhorrent to me, even though it was such a bad time in my life, what I knew was you hit the kid when they needed to be disciplined. And you yelled at them. That was normal. Their abuse is a sickness, says Tiger. Maybe. I know for my dad, he has been diagnosed with some mental health issues. Manic depressive, he has panic attacks and different things. But again, all of those head things that manifest as mental disease, how much of it was trauma, childhood trauma that never got addressed? And I talked about on my earlier Jimmy Rants that the body will do very adaptive things to help you deal with the trauma, because it's not normal to be traumatized physically, emotionally, sexually. It's just not a normal part of the human experience. And so when that happens, the brain, the body has to adjust to try to cope with it. And in some people, it really messes with their head. And I know that's what happened to my dad. Robin says, my mom was abused by her alcoholic father. She said her dad came to her after he died to apologize. Came to her as a spirit? Is that what you're saying? That's fascinating, though. So maybe she got a little bit of closure from that. That's cool. Berkeley says, your dad saying I love you is huge. That is his I'm sorry. Yeah, I have seen it that way, Berkeley. Thank you for that, by the way. I realize that's him trying to express sorrow. I sure would have loved to have heard it explicitly. I'm sorry I beat you when you were a kid. I'm sorry I told you you were going to amount to nothing when you've accomplished much more than I ever could have in my life. I'm proud of you. Never heard any of those words. And I get it. He didn't hear him either. So if he didn't hear him and he didn't have that example of being a father himself, how could he possibly know that those are the things you're supposed to say to your son? So again, I have empathy and compassion for him. I will tell you this, if I'm blessed to have a kid someday, that kid's going to be loved and nurtured and told how proud they are, I am of them, how loved they are on a daily basis, because I know better and I'm going to do better and break the cycle. Do you have any family members that are supportive? Yeah, my mom is quite supportive. My sister Beverly, who is my mom's second husband's daughter. So I have a bunch of divorces between my mom and dad. So my mom and dad married. They had me and Kevin. Then they divorced and remarried. And then they both had a kid each. So my dad's second wife's son is my half-brother Nathan. My mom's second husband's daughter is my half-sister Beverly. I call them my brother and my sister. I don't call them the half. And then they remarried totally different people the third time and didn't have any kids with those people. So we need like a little jagged edge, like family tree for the Moore family here. So it's pretty wicked. But so Beverly, my aunt Mary Jane, who I know watches me over here on Facebook, she's been very supportive, and my cousin Robert. So yeah, I've got quite a few people that are extremely supportive of me right now. So thank you for that. Miss Twiggy, I'm not sure how I deal with someone who abused me as brutally as your father did, telling me that they love me. What a mind F is that? Also, thank you for sharing. I hope you're finding healing in sharing your story. Yeah, it is weird, if I'm being honest. And I almost, when he first started doing that, it was so hard for me to say, I love you too. It was. And I know in some families, I love you just becomes this throwaway line. So it doesn't mean anything. I don't know how you add meaning to words like I love you when it's never been spoken. At that point, I was that 12 years ago? I would have been 36. And that was the first time in my whole life I'd ever been told I love you. It was a mind F, if I'm being honest, Miss Twiggy. So thank you for expressing that. My dad said, I'm sorry, promised it would stop. Guess what? It didn't. Not until I cut him completely out of my and my brother's life. Love yourself, heal yourself. Sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes if there's no contrition and the abuse continues, it's gone. That relationship's gone. I know when I left the house, I don't think I told this story the other day. When I left the house at 17, went to college, and I had an opportunity to do an internship, I thought, okay, it had been about 2.5 years. Let me see if things have gotten better in my home. So I did my internship, went back home to live with my dad and my stepmother when I was 19. And I thought, okay, I'm off to college. I'm doing something with my life. Things will be different. Well, guess what? Things were not different. I did the internship. It was a summer internship. Thankfully, it was only a couple months, 2-3 months. Was doing the internship during the day, and I'd come home at night, and I would be treated just like I was still in high school again. And I kept making it abundantly clear to him, you can't treat me that way anymore. And he kept treating me bad. He kept saying ugly things. He lightened up on the physical abuse, but was still physically and highly emotionally abusive. And it was at that point when that internship was over that I did not come home for another 10, 12 years. And he used to get so mad at me. Why don't you ever come home anymore? Well, gee, I wonder why. And I moved so far away. I moved all the way to Virginia Beach, Virginia, to get away from him. That was a good 13, 14 hours away from Bolivar, Tennessee. Got away. Didn't want to see him. I missed my Aunt Mary Jane. I missed some of my cousins. I missed everybody that I wanted to see that I grew up with. I sure did not miss my dad. For a long time there, did not want to see him. Didn't care. He didn't care about me. Why should I care about him? And even to this day, it's painful to go back there. There's just a lot of negative memories. Every time I go back, I get some ugly, nasty memory pop back up again. When I go to certain parts of the town where we used to live, where his restaurants were, all of this re-traumatizes me all over in my head. I don't want any part of that. So see, guys, even in the midst of the healing, you're going to have these moments where you're going to have to face these things. Doesn't mean that you're not healing. It just means there's still work left to do. Sharon says, forgive or not, there will always be moments that hit you. I was just talking about that. So when I've been at weddings and I see a bride and her dad dance, it breaks my heart that I never had that, and it sucks. Yeah, I'm sorry you didn't have that experience. I never had a grandpa because both of them died in their early 50s before I was old enough to know who they were. So I feel ya. Miss Twiggy, a bad therapist can definitely exacerbate problems. Been there, yeah. A therapist does matter, says Mommy's Running. I went to several before I found the right one. So glad your mom is supportive, says Miss Twiggy. Yeah, she's been amazing. In fact, I talked to her today. It's so funny. I get on the phone with her now, and I automatically just chalk it up. We're going to talk for at least an hour. And it was about 55 minutes in. I'm like, Mom, I actually am back at work. I got to go and do some more work. And she, I could just talk to you all day, son. I said, it's beautiful. Like, my relationship with her has blossomed since that asshole of a stepdad died in September. And I hate to say it that way, but he was. We even talked about, because she says that she's had a lot of guilt and regret over what she did, sending me to live with my dad. And I said, don't do that. I said, what happened, happened. We can't change what happened. What I want you to see now is, because that happened, I'm now able to help people in my work today. And I don't want you to feel bad, because number one, you don't need to. At this point, what's done is done. What happened, happened. There's nothing we can do to undo what happened in the past. But we sure can use it for good now, and we are. I am. And I said, but what was the option? Go live with my physically and emotionally abusive dad who was a manic depressive, or stick around and have your manic depressive husband, my new stepfather, do the same thing to me? There was no way out of that. It was going to be ugly either way. Maybe going to live with my dad was the better option, because this piece of work guy she married was not going to do me good either. And I had no respect for him. I was a very strong-willed kid. Imagine that, Jimmy, more strong-willed. Bullock in 2018, be a kind adult to children. You never know what they're seeing at home. Yes. When I see children today and I see how unhappy they are, I know something's going on at home, because children are naturally happy. If a child is not happy, it shows. You can see it. I saw it last year at one of the speaking events I was at. There was a family that came, and there was one girl, you could just see it all over her face, that she was not happy. Something was bad, wrong at home. And you see it, and it's very sad. Beth says, OMG, the amount of times I tried to be nice when at my parents' lasted at best 5 minutes. It was a combo of introspection and keto that made the difference. I see them as individuals who also had a past making them the way they are. Then compassion happens, and then love. Yeah. Old Soul Home reminds me of the Mercy Me story. Yeah, so somebody else mentioned that earlier. So there's this movie, I think it's on Netflix. You can still watch it, called I Can Only Imagine. It's based on the Mercy Me song by the same name. And he had a horrible dad. And this is one of the biggest Christian music groups out there. And the lead singer, I think his name is Bart Millard. His dad was highly abusive and alcoholic, really bad. And he had to come to this place of forgiveness and releasing anger and bitterness. And he held a lot in him. And when he let it go, God spoke to his heart, and he wrote that beautiful song, I Can Only Imagine, that everybody sings now. One of the biggest songs in Christian music history. And it came from someone who was broken. Beth says, a past making them the way they are, then compassion happened, then love. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate that. Sometimes it was easier if he was mean, because then I didn't have to get the special attention. Yeah. Lots of pain there, guys. My opinion, drinking alcohol and having a great family just doesn't work together. No, it doesn't, Bullock. Do you ever get angry because your mom didn't stand up to your stepdad? Angry's not the word. Disappointed. And I told her for years, you gotta leave him. Because he was so emotionally berating to her all the time. And everybody around her could see it. And her reasoning was, well, He's sick, and he was very sick there for the last like 5-10 years of his life. It was so funny. He had oxygen, but then he'd smoke cigarettes. Weird. And she felt like she couldn't do that to him. So I admire that about my mom, but she should have got out of that relationship. She should have not gotten into the relationship to begin with, but that was her choice. I even called her out on that today. I said, you made some sucky choices for husband. So, pediatric psych hospitals are full, says Sophia. Yeah, they are, because kids are still developing in their brains. This is something I haven't really talked about yet either, and I'm going to definitely get into with some of the interviews I'm doing on the Living La Vida Low Carb show. I just confirmed I've got another mental health expert coming on, a PhD in this, named Dr. Chris Palmer. And I'll be interviewing him next Wednesday for an upcoming episode of Living La Vida Low Carb show. And I'm going to ask him that, how the developing childhood brain handles trauma. And while it's still in development, your brain is in development, and then this trauma hits. Does that stunt some of the brain development? It would have to. How would it not? You have to adjust. I've done my own healing. I was just saying it wouldn't matter if he did say, I'm sorry. Well, sometimes I'm sorry helps, but sometimes it just feels like another empty, I'm sorry. All right, so I'm going to have a little bit of time here, looks like about 5 or so minutes to come to Facebook. So thank you guys for being here. Let's see what you guys have to say. Any comments about what I talked about here today? Anger is a secondary emotion, says Marcella. There's always another emotion beneath it, which includes hurt, sadness, grief, guilt, and shame. Yeah, all of those things are true when you have pain in your life. And anger does follow just about all of those things. With kiddos with PTSD, we work on helping them identify the underlying emotion at the root of their anger. And so when you look at the underlying reasons for emotion popping up, that's good. Unfortunately, most people don't do that work. Marcel also says, my abuser was more physical than verbal with me, but was more verbal with my brothers because they could fight back physically. Yeah, if you know that they can hit you back, then you don't hit them. Could be borderline personality disorder, says Christy. A person with BPD views others as either complete crap or completely a saint. Very little in between. Oh, you're talking about why he beat me and my brother, but Kevin, but not my brother Nathan. It could be, and I would not be surprised if he had like a split personality where when he was around Nathan, oh, my wonderful son, and then he was around me and Kevin, and we're the worthless piece of craps that he thought we were. I wrote a long letter to my abuser detailing every single event, and that was very cathartic. Did you mail it? Or I've heard of like writing a letter and then just never mailing it. I did best with a trauma-based therapist. Yes, Marcella, thank you for that. There are specific therapists who do work with just people with trauma. My ex abused our first child mentally and physically. Rarely, he was a shy personality. My second was physical more and mental because he was not taking it easily. Fought back, same with me. I appreciate you sharing your story. So thank you, Facebook. Let's come back to Instagram because we're running out of time, you guys. I would love to weigh in on that show as a parent of a PTSD child. Sophia, reach out to me. I am talking to a lot of people on my podcast, both victims of childhood trauma who've been able to overcome, as well as professionals. So please DM me here on Instagram. There's a story behind your mom's choices, a lot of pain. Yeah, I agree, Berkeley. And I've told her as much that, maybe you had some stuff. Now, she didn't have an abusive father. She loved her dad. So I don't think that was the issue. Healthy keto chick, what type of therapy would you suggest to dig through suppressed trauma? I think I was drugged twice as a child. I have snippets of memories, but feel there may be more. Stay tuned to some of the Live and La Vida Low Carb show because we're going to talk about this thing called the somatic therapy, which could be very helpful. TRE, help me, trauma release exercise, says Elise. All right, guys, we are done here with this episode of Jimmy Rants. As always, jimmyrants.com. Check it out over there, the past episodes. It's also on YouTube, and we'll be back real soon with another episode of Jimmy Rants. See you later.